Good afternoon and welcome to Reimagining Backup Strategies for MEDITECH Environments, a health system CIO Media Inc. production sponsored by Pure Storage. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments as they occur to you in the Q&A box, and we'll take those later in the program. And we're going to do a little poll later in the event, and then we will take a look at those results. Nice way to set up your screen today. In the top center, click on that, get it in side-by-side mode. You can adjust the divider using the slider to get the video boxes and the slides the size you want them. And it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner. Just so you can see how we're going to spend our time today, we're going to go about 35-40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Brian Davis, CIO at Magnolia Regional Health Center, Rich Temple, CIO at Deborah Heart and Lung Center, and Priscilla Sandberg, Global Alliance Executive with Pure Storage. So without any further delay, we're going to jump right into our conversation. Brian, can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure. So Magnolia is a standalone 200-bed healthcare system. We're located in Northeast Mississippi. We service about a 7-county area that include portions of Northeast Mississippi and Southwest Tennessee. Magnolia offers about 30 service lines, including orthopedics, heart and vascular, cancer, respiratory, among others. We operate about 20 ambulatory clinics in the region, including primary and specialty care, as well as providing home health and hospice services to the area. We do all this with an integrated medical record solution across the continuum of care powered by MEDITECH. I'm currently the CIO. I've been in this position for about 3 years, and I have been with Magnolia for a total of 13. My responsibilities are basically core technology and infrastructure and overall administration of the IT department. So basically, I just try to stay out of the way of my amazing team and try to do what I can to enable them to their success. So.
Very good, Rich.
Good afternoon. My name is Rich Temple. I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the Deborah Heart and Lung Center. I'm also the HIPAA Security Officer for Deborah Heart and Lung. Deborah is an 85-bed cardiovascular specialty hospital in the wilds of southern New Jersey. And for those of you who have mental pictures of New Jersey, we are actually as much in the wilds of New Jersey as you can be. We're very proud of the fact that we have some of the highest quality scores in the state in terms of the areas that we specialize in, cardiology, vascular, and pulmonary. And we also have another thing which is unique about us. We're one of 3 hospital systems in the country that don't balance bill our patients. As part of our mission going back 95 years, and the patients can get our excellent care and not get a bill at the end, which is something which is really, that kind of culture is woven into our DNA. So it's a really nice place to work. We're currently on MEDITECH 615. We're in the process right now of migrating to MEDITECH Expanse. We're looking to go live on that early in March of next year. Our primary network configuration is on-prem. We are remote hosted. We have a third party that actually hosts our MEDITECH instance, and that works well for us just because we are a small hospital, and it brings us the benefits of being able to have 24/7 access to people if something happens at weird hours. So I'm delighted to be here and delighted to have this conversation.
Very good, Rich. Thank you. Priscilla?
Thank you for having me. My name is Priscilla Sandberg. I've spent the last 17 years in field sales for MEDITECH, and I transitioned over to Pure about 2 years ago. My partner, Chris Bokus, and I manage the alliances for all of the EMR vendors, so MEDITECH, Cerner, Allscripts, NextGen, CPSI. We work specifically with MEDITECH customers on specific Pure configurations, backup solutions, and we've had a lot of success in the last couple of years. Pure is the fastest growing storage vendor in the MEDITECH market, and Chris and I are just pleased to be a part of it.
Very good. All right. Next question. Brian, let's start with you. How are your backups currently managed, and how many resources do you have doing backups?
Yeah, so Magnolia is an on-prem, so all of our MEDITECH environment is on-premise. We host in our own data center. So we leverage actually 2 backup solutions, one solely for MEDITECH purposes, and then a secondary solution for enterprise digital solutions. For MEDITECH, we leverage the Bridgehead application. We do 2 full daily backups. The first backup is stored on an on-premise device, and then we actually replicate that backup data to a secondary device in a secondary location that is operated by Magnolia. The second full backup is actually targeted at a secondary data center, which is hosted by our disaster recovery as a service partner. This backup is then replicated between 2 Tier 4 data centers in their ownership. Kind of the issue that we've ran into with this solution is that because we're doing daily full backups and the amount of data that we're backing up in our solution and pushing across the internet, the RPO and RTO for this solution is a little higher than we would like it to be at 24 and 12 hours respectively. So we are actually currently in the process of migrating to a new two-tier storage solution where we'll continue to store backups locally and replicate those to our secondary site, but we're moving to a change block tracking, always-on replication solution for our DR site. So this will greatly enhance our RPO-RTO time down to between 0 and 2 hours if we ever needed to call a disaster. We also have a downtime solution that we push pertinent information out to workstations in encrypted format. And basically, this is just a gap coverage to get us by until we were able to stand up our DR solution.
Very good, Rich.
In our world, I really have just one person and change who are involved with our daily network backups. Like I said, our network is done on-prem. And we do snapshots every 2 hours, and we do full backups daily, and we have a cycling for how long we maintain those. Dailies become weeklies, which become monthlies, so they cycle out over time. As I noted earlier, for MEDITECH, we remote host our MEDITECH system, and at that remote hosting site, they have redundant data centers. They have robust backups that include both multiple snapshots of the VM, along with IDRs, which are intermediate disaster recoveries. That's done every 4 hours. Full backups are done every day. Doing MEDITECH backups is tricky, as I think many of us know, because the MEDITECH world is not so much like an Oracle world. It is one giant database, and you just back that up. I mean, it's very decentralized, and and you have to do everything within a certain window of time, or you wind up having user impacts if we don't like. So it's tricky. But we have seven servers plus, and things have to be moved around at just the right point. So it's tricky. Like I said, we inside Deborah with our information systems team are primarily focused on our network backups, but we have to make sure that we're working hand in glove with our third-party partner, because in the event of a disaster, we're going to have to make sure that we're bringing everything up at just the right time, and we're coordinating what has to be brought up on our site versus what gets connected to their site. So we're always striving to improve our RPO and RTO every day as well. That's the perpetual challenge, and tools get better and better, but it's a cost, certainly.
Priscilla, we heard Rich use the word tricky at least 3 times. So
tricky.
What are your thoughts on the question, or anything you've heard the panelists say so far?
Well, I think that, to both of your points, it's a resource that is being utilized to either manage, track, ensure that these things are actually happening. And, what we've seen with some of the customers who switch to Pure and consider backup as a service solution is that we're taking some of the burden off of, all of the burden off the sites, and taking those staff back into the organization so they can deploy other things like telemedicine or virtual waiting rooms. And then also just eliminating the risk, Rich, like you talked about, being able to have to coordinate with another third party to restore the system. You're right, it is tricky. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts. And if one of those parts fails, it can be disastrous for the organization.
Rich, is this harder, you think, than for other EMRs?
I think it probably is somewhat harder just because of the distributed nature of the MEDITECH database. There's not one place that you go that you can point to and say, okay, I'm backing that up, and boom, we're ready. So I think it is a little bit trickier based on the fourth time I said that. Okay, but I like that word, and it's
It's a good word.
and it's appropriate, I think,
Yeah.
given given what goes on. Um, so it's So yes, it is more challenging, I would say.
Brian, what are your thoughts around that?
I agree. Because of the unique architecture of MEDITECH and their flat file kind of database architecture across multiple systems, you have to QES or QIS all of those writes and reads from that database architecture prior to taking a snapshot and backing it up. And because of that, the complications of that, it leads to a lot of opportunities for failure in the backup solution. So.
Okay.
Yeah. MEDITECH actually. MEDITECH. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying. So it is tricky.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was say MEDITECH actually wrote some software. They call it MBI MBF, which is MEDITECH Backup Initiator and MEDITECH Backup Facilitator, because it had been so challenging to try to do this. And from what I hear, that works great when it works. But again, it's like conducting an orchestra. Every piece has to be coordinated just so, or the potential for user impacts or unsuccessful backups or restores could take place.
All right, very good. Let's go to our next question. Actually, Rich, I'm going to stick with you here. What keeps you up at night as it relates to backups? We love that question in journalism and facilitating conversations. One of our favorites.
It's one of those CIO questions when people say, "What keeps you up at night?"
Usually, 99% of the time, it's on security. Right.
Yeah, and I would say this is in that 99%. What keeps me up at night, frankly, I think, is a healthy dose of paranoia. So we think we're doing everything right. We do all the disaster recovery drills that we possibly can. We're working with our partners to make sure everything is happening just so. But what if, in the event of an actual emergency, everything that we've tested, every drill that we've done, every exercise that we've attempted to perform doesn't work the way we wanted it to? And sometimes you don't know until it actually happens. On the test stage, everything goes fine, but in real life, people are panicked, they're stressed, they're nervous, and maybe a ball drops. I worry about that. And of course, the whole notion of becoming the victim of a cyber attack keeps me up at night. Again, we do everything we possibly can to prevent that, but we know that the attackers, we have to be successful 100% of the time at blocking things that would necessitate us having to recover from backups. The bad guys only have to be successful once. So if you look at it, the scales are tipped toward them. So I worry about that.
Brian, what keeps you up at night?
I'm going to have to echo a lot of what Rich just said. My biggest concern is, are my backups going to be there when I need them? Kind of echoing the same thing. We do annual tests. We stand up the entire environment. We run through these. We do routine recovery operations. But I mean, again, there's cyber actors out there that are actually targeting backup solutions. So am I replicating bad data to my site? So, we do a lot of things to provide cyber defense mechanisms to, up that comfort level. We're our cloud vendor that's doing our disaster recovery as a service. They basically have logical air gapping in their solution where they're monitoring the traffic, and if they see any intrusive traffic that is not legitimate traffic, they will disconnect the connection between our sites. They stand up. If we were to call a disaster, they'll actually stand that up in an isolated environment. They'll do a cleansing review process prior to releasing it to us. MEDITECH is always involved in these processes, so MEDITECH ensures that the site is operational prior to releasing. So, I mean, there's a little bit of comfort, but that's probably still the biggest thing, a concern is when I need it, is it going to be there?
Right, and Priscilla, what it makes me think is that as much as you try and do disaster preparedness drills, there's the fear that I'm never going to really be able to replicate what it's going to be like. So I'm practicing a scenario, but unless I throw the organization into disarray, I can't really know what it's going to be like. So I don't know if I'm ready. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think those are all valid points. And how do you know if it's going to be ready? And then there's always the consideration of, what if there's an unforeseen natural disaster? And people say, well, I live in New Jersey, so there's not going to be a tornado. But I had a client out in Iowa, and one year they had crazy flooding and their entire data center just got buried in 2 feet of water. So you might have a great backup, but now you can't redeploy it because your infrastructure is soaked. So what we're able to do with our partnership with Healthcare Triangle and AWS is not only outsource the backup process, but also spin up a copy of your MEDITECH system in the AWS cloud. So while you're draining your data center, you can still be running MEDITECH. We can fail over instantaneously running that same instance, because to your point, it's the unforeseen circumstances. I had a customer down in the Caribbean. What could happen in the Caribbean? A tornado, a hurricane, except for what happened? It got real hot one day and their air conditioners died and their whole data center overheated. So again, I think it's the things you don't expect are the things that happen. And, if somebody trips over a cord or an employee makes a mistake, you're not going to be able to foresee a lot of those things. So wouldn't it be great if someone else was managing your backups and you had the option to fail over to your live system while you could get your own house back in order, deal with whatever ransomware, or corruption was occurring with your system. So that's why we designed it, is for the what ifs, right? The what ifs, the insurance policy.
All right, very good. Next question, Brian, let's start with you. Have you ever tried to restore, and if so, how did it go?
So yeah, we actually do full mock disasters on an annual basis. So we contact our cloud partner, we declare a disaster, and they'll actually start the process of standing up the environment. So we do this over a week period. So we run through multiple days of operational testing in the cloud environment in conjunction with the on-prem still operating. We involve subject matter experts, module owners throughout the organization in this process, and run patients all the way through the system to verify that it is working. This allows us not only to test the recoverability of the infrastructure, but also disaster operations. So, like, can our users log in to the environment? Can we print? Can we e-scribe? And so on. So these functional tests tend to go pretty smoothly with only a minor issues, and I attribute a lot of that to our disaster recovery provider because they perform these operations on a normal basis, these tests. So they're extremely efficient at what they do and their knowledge of restoration processes. And again, they work directly with MEDITECH to ensure a seamless handoff to the customer, to the site prior to handing off.
Rich?
I've actually got a story for your audience.
Love it.
So I've been with Deborah a little over 5 years now as a CIO, and on my 6th week on the job, we were getting word that MEDITECH was crashing and crashing hard. And so we're running around trying to figure out what we need to do. MEDITECH goes down, and we're realizing very quickly that we have basically a catastrophic disk failure, and we were hosting on-prem at that point, so it was all on our servers. And so we go back and we load the first backup tape, and it's unreadable. We load the next backup tape, and it's unreadable. We load a third backup tape, and it's unreadable. All of a sudden, I'm like, dear God, I've been here 6 weeks, and look what's happening. And finally, the fourth one comes up, and we weren't backing up with the same frequency. Our backup protocols were somewhat more antiquated back then. So we're finally able to go up, but in essence, we're talking about an RPO of about a day and a half. So we wound up, we had a vehicle for being able to recover a lot of that. Was a lot of people heads down for a couple of days trying to get us. So if anything taught us the importance of testing, making sure our backups are sound, testing restore procedures, and having a robust plan for handling this, and making sure we're dotting every I and crossing every T. It was a very sobering experience. It was what they call a trial by fire for a new CIO. But we're still here, and I'm still here. So I guess it worked out ultimately.
So you lost a day and a half of data?
Yeah, what happened was we were able, the system was able to come up briefly. So we realized this was just a matter of time before it crashed again. We ran off every bloody report we possibly could, and we had something to key off. So we got a little lucky on that one. So we had a lot of reports that we were able to key back into MEDITECH manually. It took days, but we ultimately got through it. But we were luckier than many. So it was a scary moment, and it reinforces everything that you hear about. Take the time to make sure that your backups are sound and that your recovery procedures are sound, because the consequences are unfathomable if they're not.
Priscilla?
I think that's the main concern for hospitals, obviously, is data loss, right? So what are the ramifications of losing a day and a half of data? How much data would be acceptable for you to risk losing? Chris and I always talk about, everybody wants a disaster recovery and backup plan until they figure out what's involved. It's so complicated, it's so time consuming. And so what Chris and I have worked to do with Bridgehead and Amazon is to say, we want to make sure people don't have to take the resources. We don't want people to have to rekey in data. We don't think any amount of data loss is acceptable when it comes to treating patients. That's what your whole job is. That's what the EMR is for. So what we're trying to do for sites is to ensure that people don't ever find themselves in a situation where Rich found himself on his 6th week of work. We want to make sure that you can fail over instantaneously and that your providers can keep treating patients. One of the things that I remember from when I was working at MEDITECH is, if something goes down, what are you going to do with your electronic MAR? There are patients that are in beds who need to be treated and have a medication record. You need to have access to that record. So what if during a disaster, your providers could go along with their business while the IT team sat back and waited for a restore from an outsourced vendor? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense than trying to put the pieces and parts back together? And I think, when I worked at MEDITECH, one of the things I really liked about it was that I felt like we were helping hospitals take care of patients by providing excellent software solutions for patient care. And I consider this offering to be part of that, is allowing providers to continue to do their jobs seamlessly and allowing IT staff to focus on supporting their customers who are providers. So at the end of the day, even it's storage, it's backup, but isn't it about patient care? And what can we do to ensure the continuity of care, especially in times like this? So,
Very good. How do you keep up to date with backup protocols and procedures? Priscilla, you want to start us off here? I mean, what are your thoughts around some best practices here?
well, I think that, again, it's complicated because you need to make sure that if something's changing on the MEDITECH end, if something's changing on the backup end, you're going to make sure that your IT staff are aware of any changes that need to be made on-prem or in your backup solution, or let's say your third-party provider or your target changes. Do they need something in a different way? So ensuring that you're doing a proper backup in order to do a proper restore means that you have an intricate knowledge of the entire process. In my experience at MEDITECH, I found that a lot of our customers were in very rural areas and had a hard time attracting IT people, specifically highly qualified IT people who you could rely on to perform the entire backup and restore process. So I think that being able to take that entire thing out of the hospital's purview and be able to simplify it. You don't have to remember anything. You don't have to know if Bridgehead is doing an update or MEDITECH's doing an update or Amazon's doing an update. You don't have to worry about keeping up with that anymore. You just allow the process to happen instantaneously. And, we can give you, if you still want to know what's going on, we'll give you a really nice, a really nice piece of software, and you can monitor it, from your couch at home. You don't have to even be in the office. And you can still see what's going on, but you don't have to be involved, and you don't have to know about some of these nuanced changes that people make that really could kind of throw a wrench in the whole backup process. So more relaxation time, I would say.
That's always good. We always like that. Rich?
I feel blessed to have the team that I have who stays close to this. I mean, they're all over this sort of thing. They love it. I personally also like to keep my ear to the ground for new technologies. I think it's important to get out to conferences or webinars. I guess more webinars in 2020 than conferences, alas. But talk to people, find out what others are doing. Make sure you have a network. Make sure you're getting the latest information being funneled to you. Just make it a focus to stay educated and make sure your team stays educated.
Brian?
Yeah, I think again, kind of echoing a lot of education through forums such as this, your MEDITECH CIO forums, things like that, Muse, collaborative efforts. Talk with your peers. Here in Mississippi, we've created a Mississippi MEDITECH collaborative group that encompasses 8 MEDITECH hospitals. And we meet on a quarterly basis and discuss things like this. What are you seeing in the marketplace around backups? it doesn't have to be necessarily MEDITECH related, but just things in general, IT. So lean on your peers. And then finally, lean on your partners, your vendors. I wouldn't have come across the replication solution to reduce our RPO, RTO without conversations with them. We would have kept status quo. So leaning on them and finding out, what they're doing in the marketplace can also be very beneficial.
All right, Brian, let's stick with you. What is your disaster recovery plan?
Don't have a disaster.
Don't have a disaster. I like that.
I like that.
That's
Hear
it.
of it?
That's
it.
what we plan for. Just don't have a disaster. That's what we plan for, and as probably some of the folks on the call today can attest, that doesn't always work out, and some of my peers can speak to that. So. And sometimes it's a little unnerving talking about this day and age because, again, with all the cyber actors out there, the bad actors, it's kind of like I'm giving away pages out of my playbook and helping them with the reconnaissance here. So I'm trying to stay one step ahead of them, but I'm helping them out in the process. So, from Magnolia, again, we leverage we have a DR as a service offering. So in the event that our data center became vulnerable, we would contact them. We would stand up our disaster recovery site. During that, as kind of Priscilla mentioned, during that effort, that downtime, that gap in time between disaster declination and recovery access, we utilize a downtime reporting solution that gives us access to that pertinent information, such as the MAR, so we can continue that continuity of care, 24-hour summaries and things like that, so our nurses and clinicians on the floor can continue to care for our patients until we have that up and operational. Once the disaster site's up and operational, we have access on all of our workstations throughout the facility. If there is a network outage, we have what we call downtime boxes that have laptops and MiFis in them to be able to access the environment remotely if we don't have internet service or network outage that was happened. Once the on-premise data center is kind of stabilized, there's actually a reverse process that we go through to recover back to the on-premise site.
Very good, Rich.
I like Brian's plan A, don't have a disaster. That's what I want. But like Brian said, it doesn't always work out quite the way we want it to as it relates to that. So in the event of a disaster, we have what we call a series of steps document, and that document lays out the systems that we would need to bring back up, the order in which we would need to bring them back up, relative priority, all sorts of other details, where the recovery media would be, who the system owner is, their contact information, who the vendor owner is, IP addresses, all that sort of thing. And embedded in that also is the anticipated RTO, recovery time objective, and recovery point objective that we believe are permissible for each system. So that's the techie piece, if you will. We also have an incident response infrastructure that's more emergency management in nature. Really works through our chief operating officer, who's the emergency manager on site. And embedded within that, we have a lot of plans as to how do we engage on communicating both to internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, and keeping everybody in the loop and making sure things are moving right along. You can plan all you want for a disaster, but these disasters tend to have lives of their own when they happen, and it's hard to really have a precise playbook. But the idea is that you want to be able to build an effective foundation for who talks to who, how do we recover, what are the things that we need to do that are unique to the particular circumstances of that disaster, and be able to execute on those.
Priscilla, your thoughts?
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I agree with Brian, and do like the plan of no disasters. We've been working with Forrester Research lately to try to get a better understanding of what is actually happening to hospitals. And through some of their research, we found that 79% of the customers that they interviewed had a ransomware attack within the last 24 months. And so while we're talking about floods or hardware failures, I think, to both of your points, ransomware is sort of the new fear, the new disaster that could happen. And in terms of ransomware, what's really important is that you have that clean copy that's backed up to an offsite location. So like you said, you can figure out where the ransomware was, eliminate it. But the beauty of the Pure and Bridgehead solution is that not only can you get that clean copy up to AWS or another data center of your choice, you can ensure that it's getting done properly because you're not managing the process. The experts are managing it. And then once you've figured out what's going on your on-prem location, you don't have to restore it. We can restore it for you. So all of the pieces and parts and procedures and the things that you need to know about and all the staff work that's being done, we can take that off. Because if there really is a actual true emergency like a flood or something where you're going to need all hands on deck, wouldn't it be great to be able to redeploy your IT staff to help out with that rather than trying to recover your MEDITECH system and wondering and hoping that it won't be the fourth tape that you load that's going to be the good copy. I mean, I think we see it as, we'll let you run it up in the cloud for as long as you like, and then when you're ready to bring it down, just let us know and we'll restore it for you. So again, just being able to reallocate some of those IT resources for more meaningful patient-centric projects.
Very good. I want to ask you, Brian, we talked about the expectations of recovery. Take me through the important dynamics and conversations that you have to have with the CEO, or the board, or whatever structure of reporting you have. What's the dynamic? Do they tell you what they expect, or do you tell them what you can do and or what might happen, and they say that's not good enough, or they say okay, sounds good? Because you want to set expectations. You want to make sure that leadership understands what you expect to be able to accomplish. Not that they find out after the fact that, oh, it was going to be 2 hours, and they said, well, that we never would have thought that was acceptable. So how does that work?
So, we have an executive team here. I report up through them, and so we have those conversations and, about what the expectation is, what we're able to accomplish, what the technology will allow for the dollar spend that we have. And so we kind of have those discussions. And, we do tabletop exercises as well. And, the question always becomes, what if we can't recover MEDITECH? What would be the damage to this organization if we can't recover MEDITECH? And then what do we need to do to ensure that that never happens? So those are kind of the conversations that we have here with leadership, senior leadership within the organization.
Yeah, so you have to make sure that these conversations happen. Rich, what is your perspective on these kind of dynamics?
Our leadership really gets it, and as they hear more and more about hospital systems being hit with ransomware attacks and the substantial costs, not only financial but reputational, in terms of what happens when that occurs and how the hospitals sort of get back on track. They get it. They see it as a strategic imperative to make sure that happens. However, that said, there also are financial realities, and we want to be able to do the best we can with the resources we have. So we always have to think creatively and out of the box. Like I said, our leadership is on board. Our board is very much on board with making sure that we have a cybersecurity plan and that we're staying at the cusp of that. And I report to the board periodically, multiple times a year, and they want to know that we're all over that. And I've got a couple of people on my board who know the world of cybersecurity, so it's not a free pass. So they ask tough questions. They're asking about ransomware. They're asking about some of the brute force attacks. We just had the incident right before Election Day where there was the generalized threat to the healthcare sector, and that percolated everywhere. So I think that also those sorts of singular events really do bring home the point that being protected it's an insurance policy in many ways. You're investing in something you hope you're never going to have to use, but woe be it to you if you do have to use it and it's not there. So strategically, I think we're pretty far along. We just have, so we have to do it in a way that balances security and also recognizes that we don't have limitless financial resources to provide.
And Priscilla, he's talking about the financial realities of things. Your solution has to be something a CIO would take to the board and say, hey, I want to do this because it'll allow me to redeploy people elsewhere. It makes financial sense and it puts us in a more secure position. So, your thoughts?
Well, we want to have that take that conversation of what if you can't recover Meditech off the table, because we don't want that to be a conversation that you have to have with the board. We want to make sure that we are providing a solution that will allow you to fail over to Meditech all the time, no matter what. And if you're doing your own manual backups and you're using legacy infrastructure that's outdated or perhaps not up to spec with what Meditech is offering, it's a real risk. And the risk of not being able to get Meditech back, it's not only about patient care, but let's talk about registration and billing, admissions, all of the things that enable your revenue cycle to operate properly. That's also going to be impacted as well. So we don't want people not be able to input charges, and back to Rich's point about manual entry. Yeah, you can keep your notes about what happened to what patient, but are you missing things when the system is down and you go to paper? Or you're waiting for a system to come back up. So we believe that the simplicity of the system and the guarantee that it's going to be an immediate failover if you would choose that type of configuration, that's where your insurance policy really is. That takes the question of what if we can't restore off the table. And I think that's what board members and executives are looking for is, okay, we don't have to worry about that anymore, that we have a solution for that.
Very good. All right. I want to get our poll out here, have a little fun with this. So we're going to launch that now. You can go ahead and our panelists can answer this too. So it's agree or disagree, pretty simple. Very few health systems have well-practiced disaster recovery and business continuity plans that would allow them to function relatively smoothly both during and after an outage. Very few, very few. Do you agree with that, or you think I'm underestimating what's going on out there? I'm a cynic, right? So we'll take a look at that in a minute. This is an interesting question I want to get to, and then we will look at our results. Um, Rich, let's start with you on this. If you had extra IT personnel resources, where would you deploy them? I think the thinking is if you had, it may or may not apply to you, but if you had less people that needed to be devoted to this kind of thing. But answer it in any scenario you want. If you had extra IT personnel, what would you do with them today?
I mean, I think that if I certainly would be able to have an even deeper security stance, which
Uh-huh.
would be helpful, because that is the thing that really garners the most attention, and that, in point of fact, is the biggest strategic vulnerability for the organization. If we have a breach or we have some kind of a cybersecurity incident, we may never recover from that, even if we could recover the technology. So I can't emphasize that enough. I think also if we had extra resources, we'd be able to more effectively support even more departments on more of a one-on-one basis than we currently do now. So it's, we're learning to do more with less, both in terms of cybersecurity, where we've been very resourceful lately in terms of I think moving a lot of good initiatives forward, but we haven't had to hire a lot more people to do that. And we also would like to be able to do the kinds of things where we can help reinforce a message that IT is an agent for transformation. It's not a cost center. We're here
Rich,
to help you.
what does it do to you when you get that advisory that came out a couple weeks ago about that major threat to the? I mean, does that ruin your day?
It does. I mean, I think there was nothing that was fundamentally different about what we needed to do, but all of a sudden stuff got serious, as they
Oh
say,
man.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like everyone's knocking on my door saying, "Hey, did you see that? What are you doing about that?" Where they might not have been asking that question as frequently or expecting a very detailed answer as much in the past. I mean, I think the threat was always there, but the fact that an element of urgency and an element of realness came to it. It was like, this really could happen to us. Shifted things into high gear. So yeah, it ruined my day, but that's what we do.
Brian, did it ruin your day?
Not too bad. Not, I guess, too bad out of the norm. But you did get these, leadership and clinical leadership, ancillary leadership, asking those questions. Hey, I saw this in the news. We're under attack. We're being targeted. What are you doing about it? I saw these recommendations. Are we doing these things? Are we ensuring that our backup operations will be successful and things like that? So, put out the emails and do some cascading communication across the organization that we are aware of these things and we are working to mitigate any threats against our organization.
So probably not the time to respond with humor and say, what threat? What's a backup? No, probably not the moment for that.
Priscilla, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I didn't hear about that. Thanks for sending it. Priscilla, obviously, this is one of your value propositions. I think that's one of the ideas is that you don't need as many people focused on this type of thing, and maybe they could be doing something more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that at the base layer, the simplicity of the pure array that the system is based on is one of the key factors in enabling not only the outsourcing, but also the management of the on-site array. So for example, I had a customer of ours that signed recently earlier in the year, and then was hit by this pandemic, was very grateful that he was able to take his 2 storage administrators off of the storage and redeploy them within the rest of the IT organization. He said that Pure was so simple, he just cross-trained his server guys. And the 2 additional IT resources he was able to deploy, they wrote their own software for a virtual waiting room and were able to deploy a telemedicine solution within 3 weeks. And one of the reasons he said he was so successful with that was because he had 2 full-time people now available. So not only the pure simplicity, but also taking the entire backup process off the plate. Again, that goes back to allowing your IT department to be more flexible, to be able to respond to strange challenges that we find ourselves facing in this time. And a lot of sites, what could you do more with your BCA? Could you do more with clinical outcomes? Could you work doing some more data analysis with your local payers? There's so many options that IT could be utilized for the better of patients, not for the dealing of backups and storage. So that's why I like working for Pure, is because we're making hospital lives easier, and that makes patients get the top priority.
All right. Well, we've got our poll results, and before I reveal them, I'm going to have my panelists guess here. Here's what I'm asking you. What is your guess for the number for percentage agree? So what percentage agree with this statement? Rich?
85.
85. Brian?
I was going to go with 80.
80. Priscilla?
I would say people don't even know if they do or not.
That's not a number.
That's a non-numeric field.
You're not getting the game.
Can't hit it, won't go in.
What do you got? Give me something.
I don't have to agree with the gentleman at around 80%.
80%. All right. Well, let's reveal the results. The winner is Rich Temple. 90%. People have no confidence in what's going on out there. Priscilla, I think that means there's a big business opportunity for you out there, because everybody thinks that nobody knows what's going on with their backups. So very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do our Ask a Co-Panelist. Rich, I want to start with you. I'd like to see if you have a question for either or one or either of your co-panelists.
Priscilla, let me throw a question your way if I can. So, I mean, I think what you're presenting definitely takes a lot off the table in terms of headaches for IT departments. Is there a big journey to go from point A to point B in the contracting and implementation process, given the number of hands that are in the pie, and how would one easily navigate through that?
We've been working with our partners this whole time. So what we would like to do is wrap it under one contract. So whoever your local reseller is, we're able to work directly with them to buy whatever gear and services are needed. Pure and Bridgehead will coordinate all of the other partners, and it's kind of like contracting as a service as well. So we put all the package together. We do have a detailed conversation with each organization, because nobody's the same. And so Chris and I will speak with the organization to find out things like connectivity, capacity, We have a site we were just talking about up in Vermont where, sending a backup to a public cloud's not an option for them because of their internet connection. So why don't we talk about someplace else we might be able to send the backup? So we consider it to be a very customized solution because every hospital is going to have different challenges, but we put it all together in one package and then you're on your way.
Thank you. Good answer.
All right, very good. Brian, a question for either of these fine folks.
Sure, I guess this could be aimed at either one. So I'm always curious about how people, or the processes of keeping people educated and informed. Moving from MEDITECH Magic to MEDITECH 6.1, our after-hour staff have become very efficient at downtime. I mean, we're doing MEDITECH updates on a quarterly basis. We're doing patching on a quarterly basis. So they've become very efficient at downtime processes. But our day shift, our normal operations during peak operational hours, they don't get exposure to it. So what have you seen or what are you doing to ensure that those staff are knowledgeable of downtime procedures and processes?
Rich, we'll start with you.
Sure. That's a very good question. You're absolutely right. Our off hours people have more experience with our scheduled downtimes than our day people do when they don't have the opportunity to have scheduled downtimes. And we've learned some of that the hard way, unfortunately, in terms of we've gone a very long time without any unscheduled downtimes. And a few weeks ago, guess what? We had one, and it was a little bit bumpier than we would have liked. And we have a downtime committee. We talk about making sure that all downtime procedures by department are up to date. We're making sure the processes that we have to make sure that MARs are printed to the right place on a regular basis, that we have offline computers in the event of a network outage. And all that works, but does that percolate down to the line nurse on the different nursing units? And the answer is sometimes yes, and sometimes not so much. So we learned that we had a bit of a challenge there because with this unscheduled downtime, because even though we had the instructions, no one had really gone through an actual exercise where there was a downtime. And like we noted earlier, we can prepare all you want for a disaster. When the disaster is upon you, your head could be in a somewhat different place, and you're nervous and you're stressed, and maybe you're panicking a little bit. So I think that I would say we need to do more, Brian, in terms of that. You're absolutely right. Our off shift tends to do it a lot better, and it's not as crazy busy. So that's something that's an ongoing process. You don't want to do scheduled ones during the day just because there's so much activity. But on the other hand, you need to make very, very certain that they have the same instinctive knowledge to fall back to the processes that we have defined and go forward from there.
Priscilla?
I would wonder what would make either one of you reevaluate your backup and recover strategy, and other than outside of some type of catastrophic failure. If you say to me, I already have a system, Priscilla, why would I look at yours? Why would you look at a new offering in the market?
Brian?
Well, I guess, we are actually in contact with Pure as we speak, doing an RFP for new storage. You're talking about cloud strategy and things like that. We do see that on our roadmap. I think we were a little slow to adopt cloud storage, cloud opportunities, and maybe just healthcare in general was slow to come to cloud offerings because of concerns around security and things like that. But I think the market has shown that they're just as secure, or maybe even more secure than your on-prem solutions. Having something that's hybrid cloud capable is very important to us now. Being able to shift workloads between a multi-cloud environment is becoming more and more important to us because of the recoverability, taking workload off of our staff, maybe potentially even improving performance through some of these offerings. So I would say that I don't know that you would have to do much work on me because we're actively looking.
Rich?
I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
Well, we're a Pure customer, and we're a relatively new Pure customer, and we're a happy Pure customer. Pure's done a lot to transform our storage. I feel pretty good on where we are in terms of the backup structures that we have in place, but I always am open to hearing about things that are new or better. Sometimes if you if you're not always looking and exploring opportunities, you're missing out. You may think that you're doing that, what you have is really, really good, but the world may be zipping by and you're not jumping on the train that you need to jump on. So it's always good to know what's going on out there.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, Priscilla. I want to give you an opportunity for a final parting thought.
Well, I think that, what Chris and I always say is that we're here to help. Pure's got a dedicated MEDITECH healthcare team. For those of you who don't know Chris, he was in the MEDITECH infrastructure division for many years. He was the creator of the infamous hardware configuration proposal. So he's very versed in all things MEDITECH. And what Chris and I really like to do is have these conversations with customers and prospects and make sure they're utilizing all the benefits of Pure and our partners for things like hybrid cloud efficiency, workload management. So I would just say, to anyone out there, if you want to have a conversation, we'd love to talk to you. We really believe that the Pure solution, along with Bridgehead and AWS, can help an organization. And we'd love to talk to you about how we can customize it to meet your specific needs as an organization.
Very good. All right. Well, that's about all we had time for today. Regarding continuing education, you can use the final slide in this deck as your certificate. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording of this event is ready to be viewed. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team. You can go to our website to register for upcoming webinars. And with that, I want to thank our panel, Brian Davis, Rich Temple, Priscilla Sandberg, and I want to thank Pure Storage for sponsoring and our attendees for coming to our events. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.